point, I think we're ready to go. I think, let's see. You might want to first open the public hearing.
Right. I want to call this meeting to order. I have like 7:01 p.m. for the official time. We do have a quorum. And tonight our agenda is the discussion and possible action on an application submitted by Ryan Ramey, SEC at West Avenue and Northwest Loop 410, 5006 PT PF P-2 ABS 706. Don't know what all that means. Non-adjacent. West Avenue commercial property for the proposed removal of 4 oak trees for the construction of a new commercial structure. And with that, Mr. Ramey, is it? Are you representing the applicant?
Yes, sir, I am. Is John Robinson on?
No, I'd asked John to attend because I had a couple meetings, a couple questions to ask him. Does John, can you text him and see if he can join us?
Yes, sir. I'll give him a call right now.
Okay, real quick, Barry.
Yes.
Mrs. Frias joined the line, so she's now on. She's an active member, so Mr. Kilgore cannot vote now that you have a full commission or committee. And then what I also need you to do is open the public hearing and tell the time.
Well, I did. I believe I just did. The time was 7:01, and I'm actually opening the meeting as of now.
Okay, very good.
Now, can I call you Ryan? I'm not talking about Ryan, our city manager. I'm talking about Ryan Ramey.
Yes, sir.
Ryan, do you want to wait for John, or did you want to? I think our next order of business is the open public hearing. But before we do any of that, I'd like you to make any presentation that you may have prepared. I'm hoping that you've got copies of the exhibits of the various site plan studies that you've done regarding the trees. Are you representing Dutch Brothers or the owner of the property?
So I will be the developer for this project. Dutch Bros is our client, and the current property owner, Chris Leak, is selling us the property. We are currently in escrow to purchase the land.
And Barry, Mr. Leak is present here for this meeting as well.
Is he on the stage or?
He's here in the audience, sir.
Okay, in the audience. Okay. So did you you texted John? Is someone here prepared to begin the presentation of your application?
Yes, sir. John told me he was logging in. Is there somebody controlling the Zoom meeting who can accept his entrance into the meeting?
I believe that would be our city manager.
Yeah, I haven't seen him yet. So
okay. I can get started. Where would you like to start, sir?
Well, we'd like to know, probably would be best to exhibit your proposed site plan and talk about what your plans are to develop your business. And so we can first see how it functions, the site functions, and then we can talk about your plans on tree removal and at the same time what your tree mitigation would entail.
Great. I'll start with just a quick review of the site plan. So if you go to page 2 of the package that you guys have, you can see we've got the driveway curb cut on West Avenue, and a customer would come in through into the property, and they could either circle around to park, and they could access the walk-up window at the patio, or if they choose, they can go through the drive-through. It's a 2-lane drive-through. Dutch Bros does not have an order box. they take orders with iPads out in the drive-through. You can kind of see the sidewalk right above tree number 1094, and then the sidewalk that divides the two drive-through lanes. Dutch Bros has employees out there with iPads taking orders and collecting payment. The order goes into the store through the iPad. They make the drink and then deliver it to the customer in the store. That allows them to get people through the driveway pretty quickly. I believe we've got 12 parking stalls, and then there's a walk-up area. You can kind of see where this kind of crosshatch stone is to the east of the building. And then there's a little dotted rectangle coming out of the building there. That's where the walk-up window would be located. Customers can park their car and come to get service that way. One other thing about Dutch Bros, they don't cook or prepare any foods. It's only drinks, coffee, tea, blended beverages, lemonades, things like that. They don't actually cook or prepare any foods. They do serve prepackaged granola bars and muffin tops, but those are all prepared off-site.
So is the dotted line on the north side of the proposed building, is that a sidewalk or is that another walk-up area? Or is that where your employees walk up to?
So on kind of the north side of the building, that's just a small awning. There's a door back there. That's where the employees enter and exit to get to the drive-through to take orders.
And it's my understanding that you don't have any indoor seating. Is that true?
Oh, yes, that's correct. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. That's correct. There's no interior seating, and the restroom is a private restroom.
Now I see that John Robinson is there, but I don't see him on video. Have you let him in?
Yes, sir.
Barry, I'm on.
Okay.
Barry, I'm on. I'm actually at home, and I don't have a camera on my home computer. I neglected that little detail. So I can see you guys, and I can hear you and talk, but you cannot see. You don't get to see my smiling face tonight. I'm sorry to say.
All right. Well, go ahead. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss about the functionality of your business?
No, sir. I think that pretty much covers it. Actually, yeah, I think that covers it from a kind of an operations standpoint.
Okay. Now, do you want to present your case regarding the tree preservation and the tree removal and how you're planning to mitigate that? Is that something John would be doing?
Yeah, yes, sir. I'll kick this over to John.
And for everyone on our committee, John Robinson is the landscape architect that has been retained by the buyer and has prepared these site plans, just to put in context who John is. Go ahead, John. Floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Barry. Luis, can you pull up the plans on the screen that we submitted, or do I need to pull this up separately on my computer?
Share the screen. You can pull them up.
I'm sorry?
I said I can share the screen so you can pull them up.
Okay. Okay, that would be great. I'm still learning Zoom meetings.
Right there.
Okay.
And Barry, I just want to make a point for the committee's understanding that this project is going to be a two-step process. That tonight, obviously, just the tree removal, and then they will be back to ARC on the actual development and the building for a second portion of this project.
Oop, I almost lost you there. Yes, that's something the committee needs to know, that this isn't for the approval of their plans. This is just for the item relative to the tree removal and tree preservation and their plans to how they'll mitigate the trees that they're removing. Anybody have an exhibit to show on the screen?
Yeah, I am. Luis, do I need to have the plans that I submitted on my computer, or are they going to be on the screen where I can access them on the desktop?
Yeah, you'd have to, sorry, sir, but you'd have to share them from your computer.
Oh, okay, okay, all right.
And I just gave access to share that as well.
Okay, I'm gonna have to, I'm sorry about that. That didn't even occur to me. I'm gonna have to sign off then off of my home desktop, then remote into my office desktop, and then sign again. That shouldn't take more than just a couple of minutes. So I'm sorry about that. If you guys could bear with.
I've got it pulled up. Do you want me to share it on my screen? Would that help?
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would save me having to sign off and sign back on.
Okay, great. Great. I will sharing it right now.
Okay. Oh, excellent. That's perfect.
Does that work for you guys? Can everyone see it?
Oh, yeah. All right. You want to have this, John?
Yes, sir. I can take over from here if you guys are ready for me to give you my spiel. All right. Our site. Oops. Do I have control of the screen?
You do not, but I can flip back and forth for you if you just tell me when.
Got it. Okay, yeah, the first sheet is great right here. The site is, some of y'all might know, is an undeveloped corner at West Avenue and Loop 410. It's in the southeast corner of Loop 410 and West Avenue. It does have frontage on both streets. It has an existing concrete drainage channel on the east side, as you can see in the top right corner of the photo. It appears as if the access to the property is only going to be allowed on West Avenue, not on Loop 410. So evidently we're kind of locked into that. It does have existing trees on it. Ryan, can you scroll one sheet down to the tree preservation plan, please? There you go, right there. Pick Dawson went out and surveyed all the trees, and then I went out and reviewed them myself and made sure that the sizes and species were accurate. There are 7 existing live oaks that are directly on the property. One thing to mention, there are 4 or 5 existing cedar elms that are along the Loop 410 right-of-way. I'm sorry, Anna, can you go back up to the original sheet, please?
Yeah.
The first sheet. You can sort of see them in the very top right corner or near the very top right corner of the first picture. The aerial photo that we used was taken in the winter. Actually, it looks like, yeah, there are 4 of them. They're right along the existing curb adjacent sidewalk at the very top of the aerial photo. They're cedar elms, so the aerial photo was taken in the winter, so they were leafless. Kind of hard to see them, but you can see their shadows.
You can see it on the lower left. Looks like, aren't those them right along there?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Barry. Those are the oblique aerial photo on Google Earth was not taken during the winter. So those were planted at some point. You know, they're 9 or 10 or 11 inches in caliper. Those look like they were planted, probably 8 or 10 years ago. They're about 40 feet off site, so they were not included on our on the tree survey, nor were they included on the aerial photo because they're completely off site. Ryan, if you can scroll down to the second plan, which would be the page 3. One more down, please. You can't see it there. They're entirely off the sheet. If you look at the sheet that's on the screen right now, right along the top is the plant schedule. The existing cedar elms are under that. So just to clarify, those are not, those 4 existing cedar elms are approximately 40 feet off site, and they're not included in our plan, nor are they proposed for removal. They're just off site. Now, TxDOT right-of-way, for the most part, is excluded from our projects. TxDOT controls their own right-of-way, and that's the case here. So that's just an FYI. Brian, can you scroll back down to the second sheet, please? All right, this is the tree preservation plan that shows the 7 existing live oaks that are on the property. 3 of them I'm sorry, there are 6 existing live oaks and 1 cedar elm. Tree number 1094 is actually a cedar elm. We're currently proposing to preserve trees 1094, 1095, and 1096. 1094 is a 13-inch cedar elm. That is at the due east of the building in the landscape space that's between the 4 parking places and the bottom of the 2 drive-through lanes at the top of the sheet. Tree number 1095 is in the bottom right corner. That's a 29-inch live oak. And tree number 1096 is the really big tree on the site. That is a 45-inch live oak. I went out and looked at the existing canopy, and there is a big limb that grows due north of the center of, which in this case is almost straight up, of the trunk of tree number 1096. But it has a pretty high clearance. It's got 13 or 14 feet of clearance. So okay. I don't envision there needing to be any more than just maybe some lower limb pruning. These trees have obviously been cared for over the years, or at the very least pruned. So they're all ideal candidates for construction and for development underneath them. But those are the 3 existing trees that we're proposing for preservation. The other 4 trees will have to be removed in order to provide room for the proposed driveway, and also for the 2-lane drive-through. So those trees are 1090. Yes, sir.
John and Ryan, I had understood that the owner of the property had an arborist inspect the trees and indicated that one tree was dead and another one was diseased. Can you address that? Is that so? And if so, which trees are they? Or do you know?
I'm not aware of an arborist report. When I was on site, I did not see any existing trees that were dead. I was on site when we kicked this project off, which is probably first week of November.
Well, that's an issue, Ryan, city manager, that would have to be taken into account depending on which tree or trees those might be.
The 3 trees that I focused on when I was on site were the 3 that are scheduled for preservation: 1094, 1095, and 1096, and those are all alive and healthy.
Okay. Is there anything you want to add to this?
Not really. I mean, the fact of the matter is that in order to develop the property, we had to, from a site planning perspective, we had to push and pull. We had to decide where the improvements were going to go, and that kind of dictated which of the existing trees were capable of being preserved, and the inverse of that dictated which of the existing trees had to be removed. So the decision was made to preserve the 2 biggest ones, which are 1095, or not necessarily the 2 biggest in size, but certainly the 2 biggest in stature and contribution to the site. So those are 1095 and 1096, and then 1094 being a cedar elm. Cedar elms have a tendency to grow much more columnar and straight up, so they're a lot easier to manage around existing buildings and existing drive-throughs. So 1094 has a long life ahead.
What is that squiggly line that goes just above 1094? Is that a contour line?
Yes, sir. That's the contour line. That's the goofy contour line that does an S-curve, which indicates that there's probably a little mound and then a little swale through the property. I couldn't discern any grade change in the property when I was out there, which means it's virtually dead flat.
Okay. Well, I'd like to open the floor to our committee members. Well, let me first ask.
Actually, Barry,
is there anyone in the audience?
Yeah, Barry, since we're still in the public hearing, we do have people signed up, and then, Mr. Leak, who is the property owner, is here and can speak to, his dealing with his personal arborist he got for the property, as mentioned before. But if you'd like to invite people who signed up, we could start that process.
Okay, I didn't know, I wasn't aware of that, but yes, let's start. If you don't mind, committee, let's start with the public giving their pros and cons, and then we'll go from there. So who is going to speak?
Barry, let me go. I need to find out. Just a second, Barry. Okay, Barry, first we have Kevin Nippa signed up, and then Mr. Leak is here who'd like to speak, and I'll check with another resident who's here who'd like to speak, I guess. Go ahead, Mr. Nippa.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much, Architecture Review Board, for letting me speak. I'm Kevin Knipp. I live at 210 Hibiscus Lane. As many of you all might know, I'm running around Castle Hills on my bike and walking all the time. My parents bought property there in 1952. They were there even before then, so they've seen a lot, and I've seen a lot too. Now, I would like the indulgence of the review board to give me a couple of extra minutes if I go over it, because this is very important about these trees and the history of that land. Now, that creek that goes by that goes by an HEB, is Almas Creek. And as you all know, Almas Creek is the headwaters of the San Antonio River. That was a floodplain. Back in the late 80s, that Corps of Army Engineers and TxDOT came in there, and that land that you think is flat has a slight mound to it. That creek bed was taken down many feet, as you can see, so that the area wouldn't flood anymore for preservation. At the time, a lot of trees were removed then. Now, that creek floods very bad. Now, it still floods over there where you're going to propose to build. Now, the trees you're talking about would be a travesty to remove for this reason. I think it's 1094, I believe. I went over today and looked at the land. First of all, I'd like to know how many of the Architecture Review Board have even gone to look at the trees on this land. I think it's very important that the public be given more notice. The sign that was over there was very hard to see. I happened to see it accidentally when I was out riding my bike, and that's why I came to the meeting right now. As you know, I'm a resident, and I want to preserve as much as we can. Now, I know HEB is there. I know that it's a business area, but I believe that the proposed plat for this buildings would do much better if it was moved around. Now, I take point with what they said about these trees. The sickest tree on that property, first of all, we've had a drought this year. The 4 cedar elms that were there were put down by TxDOT to preserve the land because that land flooded very bad back in 1988 or 87. We had a horrible flood that flooded HEB and restaurants there. And even Dairy Queen was underwater and a city bus was flooded away. So when they did that land and lowered that creek bed, they put those trees there to sort of alleviate the water so it would slow the water down. Now, the only tree on those trees have suffered from this drought this year. The one tree that is sick is 1094. It is a cedar elm. It will probably come back next spring, but it is sick because of the drought and because of ground conditions. All of the oaks, I just looked at the trees again today, and I looked at them on Monday, are very healthy, very viable, and very old. Now, many people say these trees are only 100 and 150 years old. Well, I take point with that because the World Wildlife Organizations, American agricultural societies, and the Department of Interior have said that right now oak trees in Texas in many places never grow even a ring. I happen to had one time had a piece of wood from their area where those trees are. It was made a table into by a neighbor. We counted the rings on this. And instead of being a 150-year-old oak tree, it's as big as the ones you're going to remove. It was nearly 496 when we counted because it was polished. Now, I think removing trees just for profit, if you're not watching what you're doing, will cause destruction to the land. Now, these trees are all very healthy. Like I said, the one cedar elm, 1094, is sickly, and it may die before the winter's over because of the drought. But the oaks are very healthy, very viable. I believe a proposal with HEB to try to have egress in this property would be much better. How many of y'all members have even gone to look at this property? I'd like to know, I mean, but have y'all even looked? Because if you walk over to the property, thank you, sir. If you look at the property and look at it, you can see how much is in the property that's much bigger. And since during this pandemic, supposedly this building will not allow people to come in. Well, I think for the future, we need to preserve the trees. What if this coffee house has limited parking there, or if someone's shopping at H-E-B or anyone else wants to go over there and get a coffee and sit under these trees? It would be a gem to do this. And I think the developers, the owner of the property, I know that if I own the property, I'd want to be able to do what I want with it. But you can't keep cutting down heritage oaks. And again, some people say these trees are only 150 years old. Well, we're going to find out years later when these things are cut down, they're a lot older. And you're cutting down something that was probably there when Columbus was here. And even if it's just 150 years old, go 150 years back during the American Civil War. When my parents came, West Edmond was a dirt lane there, a dirt road. So while I'm looking at the property, I'm trying to wrap this up because I know that time is important. I believe that reconfiguring how this building was built, like you do in Austin, I know Austin might not be in some people's ideals, but push the building back, preserve all of these trees, and they are healthy, believe me. I grew up in a ranching family, and they made money off the land, and they preserved stuff. They didn't chop down oak trees just for firewood if they were healthy. Trees were important for canopy and cover, for your cattle and for your agriculture, and for your livelihood. I believe if these trees were preserved and kept, and nature's done a good job of raining and everything and taking care of them over the years, it would be a gem in Castle Hills and a gem for Dutch Brothers Coffee House to reconfigure their design on this. And I asked them, please, and the developer and whoever else is doing this, to talk to H-E-B and see if H-E-B can work out something. Because I'm sure H-E-B would be more than happy to have egress and stuff, because then they can get people to come in H-E-B shop, go get a coffee and come out. I am against moving these trees. Anybody that has not gone onto this property, please ask them, go walk the property, look at the trees personally, look at them, walk up to them, look at them, see how alive they are. Now, I thank you all for your time. I also believe that we cause a traffic hazard if you didn't come through H-E-B parking lot. But I'm very against moving trees, because when do we stop just for progress? And if you all haven't seen, these are very large trees and very healthy. And I believe it would be a travesty and a sad day in Castle Hills when we have a developer that can't build something that would be wonderful for the community, but can't see to move it back a little bit more into the plot and reconfigure the whole setting. Because the way this pandemic's going, restaurants are not going to be open all the time. Wouldn't it be nicer to put out tables under the trees and people could sit there, drink their coffee and shop and enjoy themselves? And it might even get on a national cover of a magazine. Look what Dutch Brothers did in San Antonio, Texas. Preserve these trees and made the environment friendly for everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ryan, next.
Go ahead. Ma'am, go ahead and speak, and then the property owner, Mr. Leek, will speak. Okay. And Barry, just for the committee, you know, this is focus of tree removal. They are working with H-E-B on a shared agreement during this process, so just want to let everybody know that.
I'm Elizabeth Newton, 111 Carrollwood.
And you have to speak up a little bit.
Can you pull the mic?
A little closer like that?
Yes.
Is that fine? Okay, I'm Elizabeth Newton at 111 Carrollwood, and I've been a resident since 1968. And I love the trees because they're beautiful. Instead of just being cement buildings, I'm a regular customer at H-E-B. So I love seeing the trees. And I agree with this man over here that was trying to find a way for the trees to be preserved as well as the business to be able to continue. I think a lot of kids on their bike would probably see it as a hangout if they serve something that, you know, they would like to drink. So I'm hoping that they're able to work together to keep both the trees and hopefully keep the business. I'd like to see more business in Castle Hills. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Barry, Mr. Leek is here to speak, property owner.
Do we have any people that emailed us?
I'm Mr. Leek, and this is...
No, we did not, Mr. Booth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
This is my wife, Julie Leek, whose dad owned entirely that property where Pape Dawson is, H-E-B, across the highway. All that property was the Fink farm. And so Julie's father owned it. He wanted us to have this piece. We purchased it. It is a commercial development piece. With that, I think that Dutch Brothers is being very conservative in keeping some of these trees. I mean, some people would want to knock them down. Look at Las Palapas, look at Burger King, look at H-E-B. You saw it on the picture. It's totally cement. So I think their plan is not only incorporating the trees, I think it's going out of their way to make them involved and integrated into the plan. And so most companies don't want any trees. They want to replant. I'm surprised. I was thinking, actually, in my mind, after talking to Paved Dogs, they were just going to knock down all the trees. But now that I see this, I'm like, wow, that's impressive. There was only one dead tree, which he spoke of. I don't even know if it's dead. The arborist said it's the very back one. It's kind of a limb, actually, coming out of the ground. And as far as their plan to develop, I think it's a great opportunity for the city of Castle Hills. It's they're incorporating the trees. Their design is beautiful. They're from Portland, Oregon, which we were just from. I mean, we were just at, and I think it's a perfect fit for the city of Castle Hills. They're conscientious about these things. They're incorporating them. They're keeping as many as possible. And if you look in the four corners of that, including Mr. Fink's land across the street, the storage facility, or Las Palapas or Burger King, they have tiny little 5-point plants and trees. So there should be no discrimination against this property because you know, people liking a tree. This is not what we acquired the property for. It isn't a park. It's a commercial property for development, for the city to benefit, and we all benefit in this. It's not just one party. And you're gonna, oh, go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, he pretty much covered everything. It was my dad's land where he grew up. He did sell it to HEB. They did knock down all the trees. There's none left. If you look at all the other 3 corners, pretty much the same thing. The trees have all, you know, pretty much been removed with other trees planted. There are 4 more trees planted in the front of this property. Some of them are going to be preserved. My dad was a huge naturist. He planted trees in our backyard in coffee cans and replanted them everywhere. So he and I talked about this before he died, about developing this one last little piece of property that he had. He had no problem with that. And I think that the design that they have, preserving the trees that they're preserving with additional trees that have been planted by TxDOT, is a very good compromise. I don't think it's a knockdown of nature. So I think the way they've designed it is really nice, preserving the trees that are going to be preserved.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the gallery out there that wants to speak?
Barry, I think that's it. So I think at this time you can close the public hearing so you can get into discussion with the committee.
All right. We will be officially closing the public hearing now. I'd like to hear the remarks of members of our committee and their opinion. Anybody?
I have a question. Barry, this is Maretta Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Did I understand correctly? We do not have an arborist report on these trees?
I'm sorry,
Brian, we don't have an arborist report on these trees. They are healthy, correct?
Mr. Robinson, I think, is for the developer here. The property owner, Mr. Leak here, had mentioned that he had one done. He had one done, but he could not find the report as far as from the original. I would go ahead and let Mr. Leak explain it. It's not my property. Go ahead, sir.
My biggest question is, do we know where the closest location of any oak wilt is to this property?
That is a good question. The closest oak wilt that I'm aware of is Hollywood Park, Hollywood Park is probably 9 miles, I would think. But I'm afraid that I'm not an expert on oak wilt.
Okay, well, there's currently oak wilt on Carrollwood and Prince Drive that I'm aware of between Lock Hill, Selma, and Northwest Military. I just wanted to know if there was anything closer to the current location.
I saw no evidence of oak wilt when I was out there on site. Ordinarily, when we retain an arborist to write a report, that's when we have an existing tree that's alive, but we're currently proposing to remove. And when we retain an arborist to to write a report that indicates that the existing tree that we're proposing to remove is unhealthy. And I saw no evidence of unhealthy.
Okay, so these are healthy trees, and as far as we know, there isn't any oak wilt pending or close by that would move in within the next 5 to 10 years.
Merida,
I saw no evidence.
I'd like to speak to that.
When I hired an arborist, it was right when COVID was full-fledged. We moved to the Blanco house. We moved out to our second home in Blanco, and we didn't take everything with us. I contacted him today. I think that us and Dutch Brothers, even though I've never spoke to them about this, are on the same page as to the one tree that's not worth keeping. I believe he said in the report there was one other one that was retaining water. I believe that's on the removal list. I will check that. But when I contacted him today to give me another copy of that letter, but he's out on a job or doing something, he didn't respond. But basically, I know that one of the trees for sure is in agreement with what the developer's landscaping artist is saying, which is it can be removed. And like Julie said, there's 4 planted trees along Loop 410 that TxDOT planted. So removal of a couple of trees in a development is part of a development for the city.
Okay. Any other members of the committee have any comment? Because I'll follow up on my comments when y'all have spoken.
Terry, George Booth here. I went out to the property twice, and I have a couple of problems with it. I'm anxious for Dutch Brothers to be here in Castle Hills. We certainly could use the tax revenue that they would generate. But like Mr. Canepa said, I thought possibly if the building could be moved, that we could possibly save some more trees. When I went out there, 1094, I believe Mr. Canepa identified as an elm tree. It does look like it's either dead. It may come back, as he said, but there's no growing leaves on it at this time. Also, your legend that shows the identification of the trees, 1097, 1098 are not marked, and they're supposed to be marked for us to identify them, and that was not done. So I have a problem with that. I don't believe we should go forward with this project today. And likewise, the sign that was put up to notify the residents was over 100 feet from the street. And I passed by there several times looking for the sign. I didn't see it until I actually got out and walked and found the sign. So I'm afraid a lot of residents aren't aware this project's even going on.
Okay. Any other comments? I have some questions to ask. First of all, I'd like to comment that I think everyone on our committee knows I'm an architect, and I've done a lot of buildings and developments for a drive-through service. And I've come to find that drive-through service is dependent on how much queuing they can get into a line. And so that's why it looks like an awkward queuing, but the way they've done this is they've allowed themselves the opportunity to queue quite a few cars without obstructing any kind of in and out traffic the way they've done it. And so that explains that. The other thing I wanted to comment on is I don't know how accurate this tree survey is. I don't know if normally, John, these tree surveys are right within 6 inches of where they actually are. I've seen some really mistaken locations, and I'm referencing that tree 1093. I've had my eye on that one, and Ryan, even though I'm not your architect or designing the development itself, I'm wondering if it would be possible to shift the building, just the building itself, about 5 feet to the east, and thus move that drive-through window 5 feet over and the drive-through lane 5 feet over, so we could clear that 1093 oak by about 5 feet, and also prune the one low-hanging branch that is going toward the building. That's a beautiful tree, and it would be a great feature for the development if you could suggest that possible revision to your plan. Is that a distinct possibility, Mr. Ramey?
I am not sure if we would be able to do that for a few reasons. The first being, I guess I could, John, if you want to comment here, would we put some sort of curb around it or sidewalk, something to protect it? If we could, I think just looking at the site plan now, and I would have to go back and have somebody design this, but I do not think that would be possible.
Okay. Another question and another comment. I don't know how many of the applicants or John studied the section chapter 48 of our code. If they look at the section 4855, the tree removal application approval authority allows to remove a tree that prevents access to a property or as to preclude reasonable and lawful use of the property. Now, that can be probably interpreted in a few different ways, but we have to respect the fact that this is a commercial zoning and a commercial site, and every square foot of land on a commercial site has a price value to it. So there has to be some way to allow any kind of commercial development on a site heavily laden with trees, because otherwise that property owner who's maybe owned this property long before there was a tree ordinance would have no value in the property other than it being aesthetic for the city. And so there has to be, in my estimation, some kind of a middle ground compromise. I wanted to also make mention of the fact that when you look at section 4859 of the tree replacement replacement section of the code, it says 100% of heritage trees have to be replaced with, they say, a 19-inch diameter, but John, can you tell me, I mean, I'm not 19-inch diameter, 19-inch circumference and or a 6-inch diameter. John, can you equate to me the relationship of a circumference to a caliper or to a diameter of a tree?
I sure can. The circumference is 3.1 or the diameter is the circumference divided by pi, which is approximately 3.14. So that relationship is basically accurate. If you have a tree that has a circumference of 19 inches, that translates to approximately a 6-inch caliper tree.
All right. Well, I think the code says that any mitigation of heritage trees would have to be replaced with a minimum of 6-inch diameter, because I couldn't equate to the 19-inch circumference. Would have to be replaced with a 6-inch diameter or more. The other protected trees that weren't heritage could be 50% of those could be replaced with a 2.5-inch diameter, but 100% of the heritage trees are supposed to be mitigated with 6-inch diameter, and I don't believe you're specifying 6-inch. I believe you're specifying. You can go to the next slide on the.
That's correct, because because of the predominant trees on the site, the two big trees that we're preserving are live oaks. The tree mitigation plan just shows species other than live oaks, just for species diversity. That de-emphasizes the potential impact of live oak decline or oak wilt. Meaning if you've got all oaks on your property and you do happen to get oak wilt or live oak decline, that means that all your trees are dead. So we try to mix the species. On this particular project, we specified cedar elms and Mexican sycamores. Cedar elms are available up to 6 or 8 inches. They get exponentially more expensive, and the mortality rate goes up quite a bit higher when you get above about 6 or 7 or 8 inches. Mexican sycamores grow really fast. So normally you can't find those even with custom growers above about 4 inches in caliper, but they also grow about 3 times as fast as live oaks, red oaks. Cedar elms are kind of intermediate, somewhere in the middle. But that was the idea with using the Mexican sycamores and the cedar elms, was to promote the species diversity, de-emphasize the potential impact of oak wilt if that does happen, and then also use Mexican sycamores because they grow faster.
Well, this is, I don't think the code in that section differentiates the species of the trees. It just says that 100% of removed heritage trees need to be replaced with a 19-inch or 6-inch diameter mitigated tree, trees planted at 100% the amount of the heritage trees that have been removed. And I guess you could make a case about cumulative inches, but it specifically states 6 inches for a minimum mitigation for the removal of a heritage tree. So I think that might have to be considered if we determine that this development is feasible. I don't know. I don't know. There could be other uses on the property, but I understand that this will be a very popular location, and they're giving a lot of credence to the amount of traffic they're going to control, and so they've done a good job with that. Unfortunately, there's some good trees that are going to be at stake.
Barry, can I ask you a question about the mitigation? I think you brought up a really good point that I hadn't actually occurred to me. Can you go back to the slide that shows the tree preservation plan, please? Yes. Does the mitigation requirement apply also to existing trees that have to be removed in order to provide access to the property?
Yes, it states. Let me see if I can read it. I need more light here. It says tree removal under the approval authority allows to remove a tree that prevents access to a property or as to preclude reasonable and lawful use of the property. So there is a case to be made along those lines as far as access to property is concerned, unless you can somehow worm that access to the property around in a kind of a S-curve up where the proposed building is, because otherwise all those trees are blocking access to the site.
That's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. If you look at the driveway, really the only access point that's available is where the driveway is shown on West Avenue. So that establishes the line of the proposed driveway, or the alignment of the proposed driveway. And if you go inward of that, east into the property, there's a group of 4 existing trees there, 97, 98, 99, and 96. So in order to provide access to the property with the only available driveway on West Avenue, you have to make a choice as to which of those existing trees you're going to preserve. So some of them have to be removed in order to provide access to the site. So the question is, would the trees that have to be removed, in this case 10, 97, 98, 99, also have to be mitigated?
Well, that's a legal question, I believe, would have to be posed to the interpretation by our city attorney. I don't think we're in a position to make that judgment and that conclusion. As I look at this, I'm wondering if they can't move the building over, if they can swing that driveway closer in to 96 and get one of those trees, maybe 97, within the patio area for shade of anybody that would be maybe dining out there. Is there any way that, again, Ryan, this is something that's going to go to city council, no matter how we praise it from our standpoint. And I think there needs to be some middle ground here, because this is a pretty big jump as far as some really good trees are there. And if there's any way you could make these trees a part of the design, I think it might embellish the appearance of your development. I don't know if anybody, John, you or Ryan can speak to that, but they're close enough where I would think that driveway could swing, go straight in a little bit further before it swings around the 1096 tree to allow maybe the preservation of at least 1097. That's a 29-inch oak.
Yeah, I think that might be spatially possible. Unfortunately, this is a push-me-pull-you scenario where in order to gain additional, I guess, undisturbed area to preserve 1097, we're paving more in the root zone of tree 1096. Now, I'm speaking from my recollection of the site, and I'm getting a little bit older, and my memory is not quite as good as it used to be, but my recollection when I was on site, although this was not the reason that I was there, was that 1097 and 1098 are growing substantially under the canopy of tree number 1096, because tree 96 is much, much bigger. So my recollection, and unfortunately it's not solid, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but my recollection of 1097 and 1098 is that they're growing under the canopy of 96 and growing to the north and northwest. So they may not be ideal candidates to preserve, if for no other reason, just because of that. So that might leave us trying to find a way to preserve 1093 or 1099.
Okay.
And one other thought that I just actually had this thought a minute ago, but I didn't have an opportunity to voice it. One of the reasons that tree number 1094 might look bad currently is because it's a deciduous tree and it's December now. So it might have already started its leaf drop. Cedar elms tend to drop their leaves in anywhere from the beginning to the end of November. So that might account for the reason that tree number 1094 doesn't look good right now, because I didn't notice anything about it, any negative characteristics of it when I was out there on, I want to say about November 8th or 9th. And we've had obviously a cold spell since then. So it might just be dropping its leaves because it's wintertime.
I have a question. This is Moretta Scott. Going back to tree 1093, I couldn't find a legend on the site plan for the diagonal lined area, shaded area just to the left of tree 1093. What is that area?
Hey there, this is Ryan Ramey. I can speak to that. So that is an escape lane for the drive-through. Operationally, when Dutch Bros does get backed up, kind of what I was saying earlier, when employees come and take drink orders in the drive-through, say that the person at the window has the soccer team in their car and they order a number of drinks and it's taking a long time. Dutch Bros employees can take orders on the sidewalk, make the drink, deliver it to the customer in the drive-through, and that customer can then exit through the escape lane and get out of the site. This prevents traffic from building up in the parking lot and from backing up into West.
Okay, I was confused about that because it looks like it's on top of the setback. What's a setback on that side of the property?
Well, you can pave, Marietta. You can pave within a building setback. You just can't build a building structure.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
I'm sorry, just
that's
to
a
answer.
contour line that shows the grade of the site. That's not, I do not believe that that's a setback.
No,
That
it's
dash line
actually
is not the setback?
No, I'm sorry, it's a utility easement. There's an overhead electric line that runs parallel to the property line along the west or roughly parallel to the property lines along the west and the north. That's an overhead electrical easement.
Overhead, okay, so it's not underground electric.
No, it's overhead. You can see the poles. They're really hard to see at the scale on the plan. The power poles run along West Avenue, just outside the property line, within the public right of way, and they cut back to the north. I'm sorry, that's east northeast. Within the property line, there's a power pole about 25 feet short of the northwest property line, and then there's another power pole about the middle point of the northern property line, and then there's one more power pole within the floodplain along the east of the property, about 10 feet outside, which is the top right corner of the plan.
Okay, so the circle marked there, is that the power pole is the circle there?
They're tiny little dots.
Could that emergency or that overflow excess be pushed closer to the edge of the property line to go around 1093? If what Mr. Middleman said, if Barry said, if the building could be moved 5 feet, shifting to the right, and that lane could be shifted slightly to the left and go around 1093, that could be a beautiful canopy going over and giving the drive through area some shade on both sides there.
Generally, we try to keep things out of the drive-through lanes because customers are into them. Unfortunately, people sometimes aren't paying attention, and it does create a bit of a safety hazard to have impediments in the drive-through lane.
Okay, and then my other questions that I had was similar to what Barry had as far as the replacement trees in inches. If you look at the plant schedule for the newly planted Mexican sycamores and cedar elms, my calculation that there would only be an additional 18 inches of Mexican sycamores on the site once they were replanted, and only an additional 16 inches total, and that's if you take all the trees times the number of inches per tree times tree, 16 inches of cedar elm. That's only replacing 34 inches diameter of tree compared to all of the heritage trees that are being removed on the site. And you're saying they'll grow, but that's not what the ordinance reads. It reads that the inches shall be replaced.
Yeah, I think there was a discrepancy in our interpretation of that. Obviously, upsizing the trees, the proposed trees is not an issue. We are somewhat limited as to what we can and can't plant on the site because of the overhead electric line that runs along the west and the north property lines, and also to some extent on the east. We could probably squeeze another 3 proposed trees, maybe 4, and we could upsize them to 6 or 7 caliper inches. So that would be, now we'd have to change the species on the Mexican sycamores. Those, just because they grow so fast, they're just not really available above 3.5 or 3 3/4 of an inch, which is not a big deal. There's plenty of different species to choose from, but about the maximum that we could realistically do would be, there are currently 10 proposed trees on the mitigation plan. We could probably add another 4 to that, so that would be 14. We could find a way to increase that maybe to 15 at 6 inches apiece. Do the math real quick on that. Should be pretty easy, but it's late at night. That would be 90 caliper inches of mitigation. That would probably be about the most that we would be able to fit on the site. The CPS has a restriction. Now this may be a City of San Antonio restriction, but on all of our projects in San Antonio, within the City of San Antonio, we're not allowed to to propose new large species trees within 20 feet of a power line. So that would mean that the whole left side of the property along West Avenue would be treeless, and then also the whole north part of the property inward of the 410 right of way, and then a portion of the eastern right of way. I'm sorry, the eastern property line along the drainage ditch, probably the first 35 feet of it.
So the existing tree that we've been discussing on the West Avenue side sits within 20 feet, I believe, doesn't it? But it would be able to remain technically because it was already there.
Well, that's a little bit of an anomaly there. CPS, the CPS restriction of new proposed large species trees within 20 feet of their overhead power lines is relatively new. They started enforcing that 7 or 8 years ago. And obviously that doesn't apply to existing trees. The anomaly with existing trees is, generally speaking, depending on which city you're talking about and which ordinance we're governed by, existing trees that are non-heritage, that are located within easements, are exempt. However, tree 1093 is outside the easement. So if I had to guess, Barry, not having a scale in my hand right now, I'd probably say that tree number 1093 is about 17 or 18 feet from the right-of-way line, from the West Avenue right-of-way line, and the overhead electric line is probably 4 or 5 feet within the public right-of-way. So that would put tree number 1093 approximately 21 feet from the overhead power line.
Okay. You know, my guess is if we vote on this and the vote is nay because you're not able to make any kind of a compromise that would go a little bit further with some of our requests, and we recommend to City Council denial, you're then at the mercy of the City Council, and the City Council denies you. You can't come back for 12 months, if I'm not mistaken, Ryan, City Manager, to resubmit a different plan. So if you would want us to go ahead and place our vote tonight, we can see how the chips fall, but you probably do have a prospect of tabling this vote if you have any interest in trying to reconfigure this site some way in which you think it will play a little bit better with the citizens and our committee.
Barry, if we were to request,
Barry, to answer your question, this is Ryan. I'd have to find out about that particular timeline. And if council actually can overturn a denial as well, moving forward from that standpoint. But I'd have to find out that timeline. I know it's 6 months for a zoning if it's denied, but I'm not sure on an ARC. I
think I read that in chapter 48.
And
but
Ryan,
pardon?
Ryan, for the City Council to overturn a committee, do they have to have a supermajority vote to do that?
I believe so. I can check on that, but I think it's supermajority, just like the zoning is. But I can clarify that as well.
It's just a regular majority. It's not a supermajority to overturn a negative committee vote.
I'm not sure, Merida. I can find that out real quick.
That's something the client might want to know about if they need a supermajority.
So one other question that I had for y'all is, if we were to table a vote tonight, when would be the next opportunity for us to get the Architectural Review Board to vote on this?
Well, Brian, you would have to address that. It would have to be put on a notice again, and it would be, I think, the first Wednesday of each month is a normal meeting day. So
again, Barry, it's I believe it's January 6th, would be the next Wednesday. And yes, we would have to go through the process again. In this case, you know, our notification process was sending out 3 letters within 200 feet. And then the standard sign that's out there is the standard sign we use for all of our public hearings. And again, in the code, it says subject to the city manager on placement. So there's no requirement on certain distance. It's just where it was located for this particular property. So I just want to make that point to the committee as well.
Well, we'd certainly love to have you in Castle Hill. It would be a great plum for the city, but we've got some obstacles in the way. Is there any other comments that any of us wish to make from either side? Brian, did you want to comment?
I have a couple questions for you. Number one, tree 1097.
I can't hear you.
On tree number 1097, you can kind of see the dotted outline of that, how it encroaches on the building location. If we were to shift the building to the right, to the east to accommodate tree 1093, we would run into tree 1097.
I understand. It'd have to be one or the other.
Right. And if we were to move the building to the east to make room for tree 1093, is that a contingency of your approval? Are you saying that you will not approve this unless I say that we'll save?
I can't speak for the committee. I can just speak for myself as a question. If somebody in the committee wants to make a motion of a conditional approval, they certainly can vote on that.
Do you agree that we have to save either tree 1093 or 1097?
I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for the committee. I had made that recommendation because I thought it would be something that might be a feasible compromise on your part, but I can only speak for myself.
Barry, real quick, Mr. Leak has raised his hand and asking to speak again. If you would let him, as
absolutely. We want to get this as much as we can out on the table.
They're right about 1097 are completely covered, completely dead limbs on the top of that tree from 1096. 1090. Those 3 trees are absorbed by the large tree, 1096. So removal of those trees, they're not even getting sunlight right now. All the limbs on the top of those trees are dead, completely dead. They have no sunlight. That was told to us back in May. They're completely not getting the nutrition that they need. You look at the trees and there's completely dead limbs on top of them. Go ahead.
I just had one other question. Looking at HEB, and that property, when my dad sold it, was covered in heritage trees and all kinds of trees. Where is the mitigation for all the trees that were removed for that property, for the whole HEB and their parking lot? Same thing, and the storage property across. There's no huge trees that were ever. HEB is just a big cement lot. So I'm just wondering what is the difference? What's the justification between, allowing that for HEB, Pape Dawson, and the storage facility versus this small piece of property?
All being a part of Dad's land. It's the same land. So it's just an extension. So we're talking about a couple of trees, but it's an extension of the farm. So the same trees were on the other parts of HEB, Pape Dawson, the storage place, and the corner. We drove by each of those today, and there's barely any trees in any of them.
That's not true. Pape Dawson actually had some of the same issues, and they were given approval conditional on them moving a heritage tree to another location other than where they wanted to have it removed. And it was a very expensive proposition to move a tree of that size. And so you can't really, each site has to stand on its own. And I think John and I are speaking over each other. Each site has to stand on its own. HEB development, and a lot of those developments were there before any tree ordinance or any recognition of trees even existed.
Well, whether the ordinance was there or not, it was still part of the same property. It's still a tree as a tree. I mean, it's still property that we own. It's still property that we want to develop, same as HEB wanted to develop theirs.
Do you still own the property now?
Yes.
Yes.
Not the HEB property, this property.
Right.
And I do want people to go look, if you're looking at 1096 and 1097 and 10, I guess it's 1099, the larger tree is completely covering. So you're talking about one tree can make up the same shade, the same area as the other trees that are being covered. So it's, you know, you have an abundance of this cluster.
I've got pictures of both trees, 1098 and 99. They look quite healthy to me. I'm, of course, not an arborist, which I think we should request the report since it was done. And we should table this motion for a couple of reasons. One, I repeat, the sign was over 100 feet in on the property, where a zoning sign for yesterday's meeting was right on the edge of both West Avenue and Hibiscus. You know, obviously people would see that. This sign is very hard to see. And likewise, two of these trees were not marked that they're going to cut down, and they're supposed to be marked with a tag and their tree number, and that was not done.
I think that's a different zoning sign, because there's a brick wall there. There's only so much room you can place those for the zoning signs on 101 Hibiscus.
If I can speak to the tree tagging issue, we did not do the tree survey for this property. It was done by Pape Dawson, but the tree tags that are put on the trees are frequently pulled off by kids. So I also saw that when I was on site to assess the trees, and I did see that there were 2 tree tags missing. So that in and of itself is not common, but if I had to guess, I would imagine that Pape Dawson tagged the trees when they did the tree survey. It would be very, very unusual for that to not have been done.
Anyone else on the committee want to comment? A couple of y'all, Anna and Anel and Justily, right?
It's Kevin, who's next to me, Mr. Chernus, and then Anna, who's on the line.
Okay. Anybody want to make any remarks?
Yes, I would, Barry. This is Ana Frias. First of all, I want to thank Dutch Brothers Coffee for considering Castle Hills as their place of business. We really appreciate you for that. Is there any way that we would be able to know the age of these trees?
What was that question?
Is there any way that we would be able to find out the age of these trees?
No, I wouldn't know. John would have to address that.
You know, there are some areas of biology and botany that I try to stay out of just because they spark arguments. And it's been my experience that a couple of these issues, a couple of the botany related issues, like age of trees, are such that if you get 10 botanists in one room and you ask them all the same question, you get 13 answers. And the tree age is one of those items. I've never heard any concrete evidence from anyone that I can rely on, that I can trust, that would lead me to believe that there's a direct correlation between the size of a live oak and its age. I don't have any real science. Well, and unfortunately,
John, do you have any opinion on those being living things, what the lifespan is of a live oak tree traditionally?
Very. I grew up in the country, and I grew up around live oaks and hunting and fishing and napping and doing virtually anything, including some marginal things underneath the shade of live oaks. And I've seen some enormous live oaks, both as a professional and as a resident in South Texas. I honestly, if I had to answer your question, I would probably say there's no maximum age to live oaks, because the biggest live oak, I believe it's still the biggest live oak in Texas, is down in Fulton, just north of Rockport, and that thing's got to be 9 feet in diameter. I don't remember its exact size. But even those guys, as much as that tree has been studied, there's still conflicting opinions as to the age. So I wish I had some science to share with you, but I don't. Just opinions.
Mr. Robinson?
And they're not. Yes.
I actually took note of that going into this meeting. That live oak on Goose Island is slightly over 421 inches in diameter.
Yeah. It's, what does that translate to in feet?
A lot. I also did quite a bit of Googling for this meeting tonight, and you're right. There, depending on which agriculture and horticulture service you read online, I like to look at A&M, being Texas, and they do a lot of growth. You're right. There's a huge debate. In my research, a lot of people say they max out at 50 years at whatever size they're going to get. But then again, you're right. There's a lot of debate. And everything I've read, it says that they live 200 to over 300 years is what I could come up via Google. And I am not a horticulturist. My background is environmental design. So I usually prefer to take the expert opinion of my arborist or my horticulturist on that. But I did do a little bit of Google researching because I was curious about Texas live oaks going into this meeting.
Well, thanks. That makes me feel better that I wasn't the only one that found conflicting evidence out there. I can tell you, and this is quantifiable, and this is science. We work extensively, or I have worked extensively throughout Texas, and virtually every city that we work in has a tree ordinance of some kind. Some of them are long and onerous. Some are short and straight to the point. But they all assess some sort of quantifiable means of measuring a protected tree, not just a live oak, but a protected tree, and the standard is in inches. So that's what we use as our barometer, and that's also something that's measurable. That's something that we can go out and say, yep, this is a 45-inch diameter live oak.
I Googled how to age a live oak tree, and I went to several different sites, and the average is 4 to 5 times the diameter for years. Of course, during drought season, then obviously it'll be different, but that'll at least give you a rough guess. So a 25-inch tree would be, 100 years old at the minimum. Well, I propose that we table this until the next meeting, since we do have to come back and decide on something else, and have the owner or the developer provide us the arborist report that they've gotten.
Who made that statement? Who made the motion?
I did, George Booth. Any seconds?
Kevin Chernas, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion before us that we're offering to table this this tree preservation submittal until our next meeting on January the 6th, I believe Brian mentioned, in order to allow the applicant to see if they can make a more functional plan, at the same time considering the preservation in a way that might be more favorable. I believe that's the motion.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
So can we get a vote? George? Aye or nay to the motion? George Booth?
Aye.
Is Kevin here?
Aye.
Okay. Marietta?
Nay.
You said nay?
No, I would like a different motion, so no.
Anna?
I say yay.
You said what?
Yes. Yes. Yes for the motion.
And is Scott here? Did Scott vote?
No, you have the 5, Barry. That's including you.
Oh, well, what was the vote? What is the vote currently?
I did not hear Ms. Frias's either a yay or nay as far as.
Yay.
Okay.
So we have 3 yays and 1 nay.
Yes, Barry.
I would vote nay. So the motion passes, and we're going to give you an opportunity to come back with a plan we think will be more palatable to the committee. Any other business that you know of, Brian, city manager?
No, Barry. The next item is to adjourn.
Okay. It is 8:25. And did you want to make a comment, Ms. Scott?
I was going to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, please.
I move to adjourn.
A second? Okay, and Anna seconds. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the time.
Good luck.